I'd been working overtime fixing network issues at the office all week, and honestly, I was looking forward to just having a quiet evening at home. My job as an IT systems technician isn't glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy. What I didn't expect was to walk into what felt like a war zone. She was pacing around the living room like a caged animal when I got home. Her face was flushed, her hair was disheveled, and she had that look in her eyes that usually meant trouble was coming. I set my laptop bag down and tried to read the room. "Rough day?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She stopped pacing and turned to face me. "We need to talk." Those 4 words never lead anywhere good in a marriage. I loosened my tie and sat down on the couch. "All right, what's on your mind?" "This isn't working," she said, gesturing between us. "This whole thing. Us. Our marriage." I'd been sensing the tension for months, but hearing it said out loud still caught me off guard. "Okay, what specifically isn't working for you?" "Everything," she exploded. "You come home, we eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed, rinse and repeat. Where's the excitement? Where's the passion?" I leaned back and studied her face. "So you want more excitement?" "I want to feel alive again," she said, her voice getting louder. "I want to feel like I did when I was younger, like when I was with someone who actually made me feel special." "Someone like who?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew where this was heading. Her eyes flashed with something between anger and desperation. "Someone like Robert." There it was. Robert Walsh, her high school boyfriend. The golden boy who played quarterback and supposedly had the world at his feet. I'd heard plenty about Robert over the years, usually when she'd had too much wine and started reminiscing about the good old days. "Robert," I repeated calmly. "Yes, Robert," she shouted. He knew how to make a woman feel wanted. He had ambition. He had dreams. He wasn't content to just coast through life like some people. That last part was clearly aimed at me. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice level. "And what does Robert have to do with our marriage?" She crossed her arms and looked me straight in the eye. "I made a mistake not marrying Robert." The silence that followed was deafening. She stood there, breathing heavily, like she'd just confessed to a crime. Which, in a way, she had. I stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen. She followed me, probably expecting me to explode or beg or do something dramatic. Instead, I opened the junk drawer and started looking through old phone numbers and business cards. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Looking for something," I said, continuing to search. "You said you made a mistake not marrying Robert." "That's right." I found what I was looking for and pulled out an old piece of paper with a phone number written on it. "Well, Robert's easy to find." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" I held up the paper and smiled. "I still have his mother's phone number. Frances O'Connor. Remember her? Sweet lady. We met her at that barbecue 3 years ago." "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" "Call her." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. "Why not? If you're so convinced Robert was the one that got away, maybe we should see how he feels about it." "Stop," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Mrs. O'Connor? This is the husband of your son Robert's old girlfriend. We met a few years back at the Jameson barbecue." "Oh yes, I remember you. How are things?" "Well, that's actually why I'm calling. My wife just told me she thinks she made a mistake not marrying Robert. I thought you might have some insight into how Robert feels about that." The pause on the other end was telling. When Frances finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. "Oh my," she said. "Well, I hate to be the bearer of uncomfortable news, but Robert has mentioned her over the years. He always said she was the biggest mistake of his life. In fact, whenever his friends ask him about past relationships, he warns them about her specifically." I looked at my wife, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "Is that so?" "Oh yes. He said she was manipulative and always made him feel like he wasn't good enough. He told me just last Christmas that dodging that bullet was the best thing that ever happened to him." "Well, that's certainly enlightening. Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. O'Connor." "Of course, dear. I hope everything works out for you both." I hung up and looked at my wife, who was now backing toward the hallway. The confident woman who'd been lecturing me about excitement and passion just minutes earlier was nowhere to be found. "There you go," I said, setting my phone down on the counter. "Mystery solved. Turns out Robert doesn't share your romantic nostalgia." Without another word, she turned and practically ran down the hallway. I heard the guest room door slam shut, followed by the unmistakable sound of the lock clicking. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then I opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer, and sat back down on the couch. For For the first time in months, the house was completely quiet. And honestly, it felt pretty good. The guest room door stayed locked for the rest of the evening. I could hear her moving around in there, probably pacing again, but she didn't come out. Not even for dinner. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "We need to talk." I typed back. Guest room door seems to work both ways. No response. The next morning, I got up early and made coffee like always. I was sitting at the kitchen table reading news on my phone when she finally emerged. Her hair was a mess and she looked like she hadn't slept much. "Good. Can we please discuss this like adults?" she said, pouring herself coffee with shaky hands. "Sure. What would you like to discuss?" She sat down across from me, trying to compose herself. "You embarrassed me last night." "I embarrassed you?" I set my phone down and looked at her. "You told me you made a mistake marrying me instead of another man. But somehow I'm the one who should be embarrassed." "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you said. Word for word." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug like it was a lifeline. I was frustrated. I said things I didn't mean. "Which part didn't you mean? The part about Robert making you feel alive, or the part about me coasting through life?" She didn't answer that. "Here's what I find interesting," I continued. "You've been holding on to this fantasy about Robert for years, always talking about how amazing he was, how he had such big dreams. But you never actually tried to contact him. That's not true, isn't it?" I pulled out my phone again. "Because I'm curious now. Let's see what Robert's up to these days." Her face went white. "Don't." I was already typing his name into Facebook. It took about 30 seconds to find him. Robert Walsh, living in Denver, married to someone named Zoe for 2 years, working as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company. "Look at that," I said, turning my phone so she could see. "Robert got married. To someone who isn't you. Weird how he managed to find excitement and passion with someone else." She stared at the screen, and I could see her hands trembling slightly. "Want to see something else interesting?" I scrolled through his photos. Here's Robert at his wedding. Robert on vacation in Hawaii with his wife. Robert posting about getting a promotion last month. "Seems like he's doing just fine without you." "Stop," she whispered. But I wasn't done. "You know what I don't see in any of these photos? Any indication that he's spending his time thinking about the one that got away. No posts about high school girlfriends. No wistful comments about past relationships." I closed Facebook and opened Instagram. Found his account there too. More photos of his genuine life. His genuine happiness. 17,000 followers, I noted. Looks like Robert's pretty popular. I bet if I sent him a direct message, he'd remember you. "Please don't do that." "Why not? According to you, you were the love of his life. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to hear from you." She stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over her coffee. "You're being cruel." "I'm being realistic." "You want to know what's cruel? Telling your husband you wish you'd married someone else. That's cruel." She started pacing again, which seemed to be her default mode when cornered. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it?" I feel trapped sometimes. Like my life didn't turn out the way I thought it would. And whose fault is that?" She stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what exactly have you done to make your life more exciting? What dreams have you pursued? What risks have you taken?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Because from where I sit, you've spent the last 5 years complaining about how boring everything is, but you haven't actually done anything to change it. You just sit around fantasizing about a guy who clearly doesn't think about you at all. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you suggested we try something new? When's the last time you planned a trip, or took a class, or picked up a hobby? When's the last time you did anything besides complain?" She sank back into her chair, looking defeated. "You want to know what I think?" I continued. "I think you're not upset because Robert was so great. You're upset because you've realized that even he doesn't want you. And instead of facing that, you're trying to make it my fault. That's not true. Then prove it. Call Robert yourself. See how excited he is to hear from you." I slid my phone across the table. Her Instagram account was still logged in. Robert's profile was right there on the screen. She stared at the phone like it was a snake. "Go ahead," I said. "Send him a message. Tell him you've been thinking about him. Tell him you wish things had worked out differently." Her hand moved toward the phone, then stopped. "What's the matter?" "I thought he was the one that got away." She pushed the phone back toward me. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because." She trailed off. "Because you know exactly what would happen. He'd either ignore you completely, or he'd screenshot your message and share it with his friends as a cautionary tale about crazy ex-girlfriends." Tears started forming in her eyes, but I wasn't feeling particularly sympathetic. "Here's the truth. I said, standing up. Robert wasn't the one that got away. You were the one he got away from. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner we can figure out what we're actually going to do about this marriage. I left her sitting at the kitchen table and went to get ready for work. When I came back through 20 minutes later, she was still staring at my phone. I got home from work that evening to find her exactly where I'd left her, sitting at the kitchen table. The only difference was that now there were tissues scattered around, and her eyes were red from crying. "How was your day?" I asked, setting my keys down. She looked up at me with a mixture of hope and desperation. "I've been thinking about what you said." "Which part?" "About doing something to change my life. About not just complaining." I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a water bottle. "And I want to fix this. I want to fix us." "Okay, how?" She stood up and walked toward me. "I was thinking maybe we could take that trip we talked about last year. The one to the mountains. We could reconnect, spend some quality time together." I studied her face. "The same trip you shot down because it was too expensive and there wouldn't be anything to do." I was being negative then. "I see that now. Interesting timing for this revelation." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Look, I know I messed up yesterday. I said terrible things, but I don't want to lose you. You don't want to lose me, or you don't want to face the fact that your backup plan just fell through. That's not what this is about." I walked past her to the living room and sat down. She followed, hovering near the couch like she was afraid to get too close. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course. When's the last time you actually tried to contact Robert?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She actually took a step backward. "What do you mean?" "I mean, all this talk about him being the one that got away suggests you've been thinking about him for a while. So when's the last time you reached out?" "I haven't." "Haven't what?" "Haven't tried to contact him recently, or haven't tried to contact him ever?" She didn't answer. "Because here's what I'm wondering. Yesterday, you seemed pretty confident about how Robert felt about you. That kind of confidence usually comes from recent information." I pulled out my phone. "You know what? I think I'll do some detective work." "Don't." But I was already opening her Facebook profile on my phone. I'd seen her scroll through it enough times to know her password. Her birthday, followed by our wedding year. Not exactly creative. "Let's see here," I said, scrolling through her message history. "Lots of conversations with your sister. Some group messages from work. And what's this?" I found what I was looking for. A message thread with Robert Walsh from 8 months ago. Well, I said, reading the first message. "Here's an interesting conversation." Her face went completely white. "Let me read this out loud." I continued. "Hey Robert, I saw your post about the promotion. Congratulations. I've been thinking about you lately and wondering how you've been." She lunged for the phone, but I held it out of reach. His response is pretty enlightening too. "Thanks. I'm doing well. Hope you are too." Stop reading that. But it gets better. Your next message. "I know this might sound weird, but I've been going through a rough patch and I keep thinking about our time together in high school. You always made me feel so special." I looked up at her. "Rough patch? 8 months ago, right around the time you started complaining about our marriage being boring. It wasn't like that, wasn't it?" Let me keep reading. Robert's response. "I'm married now and happy. I think it's best if we don't continue this conversation." The silence in the room was deafening. "But you didn't stop there, did you?" I scrolled down. Your response. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I think about what we had sometimes. I hope your wife knows how lucky she is." I was in a bad place. And Robert's final message is my personal favorite. I need to be direct here. What we had was a high school relationship that ended 15 years ago for good reasons. I'm not interested in revisiting it, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't contact me again. I set the phone down and looked at her. "So when you told me yesterday that you made a mistake not marrying Robert, you already knew he wanted nothing to do with you." She collapsed onto the chair across from me, crying harder now. "You want to know what really gets me?" I continued. "It's not even that you reached out to him. It's that you got rejected, and instead of dealing with that rejection like an adult, you came home and took it out on me." "I'm sorry. Are you? Because it seems like you're only sorry you got caught." She looked up at me through her tears. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth. How long have you been fantasizing about Robert? How long have you been comparing our marriage to some made-up version of what your life could have been?" "I don't know. That's not an answer." She wiped her nose with a tissue. "Maybe a year. Maybe longer. And in all that time, did it ever occur to you to talk to me about whatever was making you unhappy?" Did it ever cross your mind to work on our actual marriage instead of escaping into some fantasy about your ex-boyfriend? I didn't think you'd understand. Try me." She looked around the room like she was searching for an escape route. "I just feel like we're roommates instead of husband and wife. Like we're going through the motions. And your solution was to chase after a guy who dumped you 15 years ago and wants nothing to do with you now. When you say it like that, it sounds pathetic. Because it is pathetic." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Here's what I don't understand," I said, leaning forward. "You claim you want excitement and passion, but when Robert told you to leave him alone, you didn't move on to someone else. You didn't join a dating app or go out with friends or do anything to actually pursue what you said you wanted. You just came home and decided to make me the villain in your story. I wasn't trying to make you the villain. Then what were you trying to do?" She didn't have an answer for that. That weekend, I decided to dig a little deeper. Not because I enjoyed watching my wife squirm, but because I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I started with LinkedIn. Robert Walsh, Regional Sales Manager at Watson Medical Solutions. Graduated from Colorado State with a business degree. Married to Zoe Mack in 2022. The guy had built a decent life for himself. What caught my attention was his connection list. I recognized several names from our old high school. People I could reach out to without seeming like a complete stalker. I decided to start with Tate Riley, a guy I'd played basketball with in college who'd also gone to high school with Robert. We'd stayed in touch over the years, mostly through social media. I sent him a casual message. "Hey man, saw Robert Walsh got married. Good for him. Haven't thought about those high school days in forever." Tate responded within an hour. "Yeah, Robert's doing well. Funny you mentioned high school though. He was just telling a bunch of us at his bachelor party about some of the crazy stuff from back then." "Oh yeah? Like what?" He was talking about his ex who kept trying to get back in touch with him. Said she'd been messaging him for years, even after he got engaged. He showed us some of the messages at the party. Pretty wild stuff. My stomach dropped. Years. Not just the 8 months I'd found, but years. "That's rough." I typed back. "Some people just can't let go, I guess." "Tell me about it." Robert said she even tried to friend his mom on Facebook. His mom told her to stop contacting the family. He was pretty embarrassed about the whole thing. I set my phone down and walked to the kitchen where my wife was making lunch. She looked up hopefully when I entered. "How long?" I asked. "How long what? How long have you been trying to contact Robert?" Her face went pale again. "We already talked about this. Tate Riley says Robert told his friends at his bachelor party that you've been messaging him for years. Even tried to contact his mother." She dropped the knife she was holding. It clattered against the cutting board. "That's not true. So Tate is lying? Robert is lying? His mother is lying." She leaned against the counter like she needed the support. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I reached out a few times over the years, just to see how he was doing. A few times, maybe more than a few. And his mother? I sent her a friend request once. I thought maybe she'd want to stay in touch." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You tried to connect with your ex-boyfriend's mother. It seemed innocent at the time. When was this?" 2 years ago, maybe 3, while you were married to me. It wasn't romantic. I was just curious." "And when she told you to stop contacting the family?" "She didn't answer. She did tell you to stop, didn't she?" "She said it would be better if I didn't reach out anymore. And you kept trying anyway." "Not with her, just with Robert." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through her Facebook messages again. This time I went back further. Way further. "Here we go," I said, finding messages from 3 years ago. "Hey Robert, I know it's been a while, but I saw your post about starting the new job. So proud of you." I scrolled down. 2.5 years ago. "Robert, I had a dream about you last night. Isn't that weird? Made me think about our senior year." "Stop. 2 years ago. I know I probably shouldn't be writing this, but I miss talking to you. I miss how you used to make me laugh. Please stop reading those." "Oh, this one's good. 18 months ago. I heard through mutual friends that you got engaged. I'm happy for you, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt a little." I looked up at her. "You were stalking him." "I wasn't stalking anyone. What would you call it? You've been harassing this guy for years, trying to reconnect with his family, sending him inappropriate messages while he's engaged to someone else." Tears started flowing again. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. But you were trying to what? Break up his relationship? Get him to leave his fiancée for you? I just wanted to know if he ever thought about me." "He told you he didn't. Multiple times. But you kept pushing. I thought maybe if I could just explain how I felt." "Explain what?" That you were unhappy in your marriage and looking for an escape? That you were willing to wreck his relationship to make yourself feel better? She sank into a chair, sobbing. You want to know the worst part? I continued. It's not even that you were chasing after him. It's that you were so delusional about it. You actually convinced yourself that he wanted you back, that he was just playing hard to get. I thought maybe he was confused. He wasn't confused. He was disgusted and embarrassed. Embarrassed enough to tell his friends about you at his bachelor party. That seemed to hit her harder than anything else I'd said. They were all laughing about it, weren't they? I asked. Robert and his friends, sitting around making jokes about the crazy ex-girlfriend who wouldn't take no for an answer. She put her head in her hands. So when you told me you made a mistake not marrying Robert, you already knew he thought you were a mistake. You already knew he'd rather tell embarrassing stories about you than give you 5 minutes of his time. I'm sorry. Sorry for what? Sorry you got caught? Sorry Robert didn't want you? Sorry you spent years making a fool of yourself. Sorry for all of it. I stood up and looked down at her. The question now is what we're going to do about it. What do you mean? I mean, this marriage was already hanging by a thread before I found out you've been stalking your ex-boyfriend for 3 years. Now I find out you've been lying to me about it, lying to yourself about it, and apparently providing entertainment for Robert's friends. She looked up at me with panic in her eyes. Are you leaving me? I'm thinking about it. Please don't. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Like what? I'll delete Facebook. I'll block Robert on everything. I'll never contact him again. You already tried that. He blocked you first. The look on her face told me I'd guessed correctly. When? I asked. After his bachelor party. After his friends started commenting on his posts asking about the crazy ex. So you humiliated him publicly. I didn't mean to, but you did. And now you want me to pretend none of this happened and go back to being your backup plan while you figure out your next fantasy. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? She looked around the kitchen like the answer might be written on the walls somewhere. I don't know, she finally whispered. Well, I said, heading toward the door. When you figure it out, let me know. I'll be at my brother's place. My brother Cassidy lived about 20 minutes away in a duplex he'd been renting for the past 5 years. He was 3 years younger than me, worked as a mechanic, and had never been married. He also had zero tolerance for drama, which made him the perfect person to talk to. Let me get this straight, he said, handing me a beer and sitting down across from me in his living room. She's been chasing this guy for 3 years, got rejected repeatedly, embarrassed him in front of his friends, and then blamed you for her boring life. That's the short version. And you're wondering if you should leave her? I'm wondering if there's any way to come back from this. Cassidy took a long drink from his beer. You know what I think? I think you already know the answer. You just don't want to admit it. Maybe. How long have you two been having problems? Honestly, probably since the beginning. But I kept thinking it would get better. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. That sounds like something our mother would say. Our mother was smart about people. Remember what she used to say about Dad's ex-girlfriends when they'd call the house? I smiled despite myself. Some people can't stand to see other people happy. Exactly. And that's what your wife is. She can't stand to see Robert happy with someone else, and she can't stand to see you content with your life. My phone buzzed with a text message from her. Please come home. We need to talk. I showed Cassidy the message. You going back tonight? I don't know. Well, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Guest bedrooms, all yours. Around 10 o'clock, my phone started ringing. It was her sister Irene. Hey, I answered, stepping out onto Cassidy's back porch. What the hell is going on? Irene asked without preamble. She's been calling me crying for the past 2 hours saying you left her. Did she tell you why? Something about a fight you had. She wasn't making much sense. Did she mention Robert Walsh? There was a long pause. Oh no. Oh yes. She's been talking about him again, hasn't she? Again? How often does she bring him up to you? Another pause. More than she should for a married woman. How much more? Irene sighed. Look, I love my sister, but she's had this weird obsession with that guy for years. Every time something goes wrong in her life, she starts talking about how different things would be if she'd stayed with him. And you never thought to mention this to me? I figured it was just talk. Harmless fantasy stuff. Well, it turns out it wasn't so harmless. She's been trying to contact him for 3 years. Even tried to friend his mother on Facebook. Are you serious? Dead serious. And apparently Robert was so annoyed by it that he told his friends about it at his bachelor party. Oh my God. She's going to be mortified when she finds out people know. She already knows. That's when Robert finally blocked her. Irene was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I honestly don't know, but I'm not going home tonight. Do you want me to talk to her? What would you say? That she's an idiot and she's about to lose a good man over some fantasy about a guy who clearly wants nothing to do with her. Feel free. After I hung up, I sat on Cassidy's porch for a while, thinking. My phone kept buzzing with messages from her, but I didn't read them. Around midnight, it rang again. This time it was my father-in-law. Is everything all right? He asked. She called here upset, saying you'd left. We're having some marriage troubles. Anything I can help with? I like my father-in-law. He was a straight shooter who'd always treated me well. She told me she wished she'd married her ex-boyfriend instead of me. What? Robert Walsh. Her high school boyfriend. There was a long pause. That son of a bitch. Excuse me. Not you. Robert. That little punk has been nothing but trouble for years. What do you mean? She used to call the house asking about him when you two first got married. Wanted to know if we ever heard from his family. Her mother told her to let it go, but she wouldn't listen. She was asking about Robert when we were newlyweds. First year you were married. Maybe the second year too. We thought it was just curiosity, but it made us uncomfortable. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She's been obsessing over him since the beginning of our marriage. Sounds like it. Look, I love my daughter, but she's always had a problem with accepting reality when it doesn't match what she wants. What do you mean? She used to do the same thing in high school. If a boy broke up with her, she'd convince herself he was just confused or going through a phase. She'd keep trying to get back together until the poor kid had to change his schedule to avoid her. Robert wasn't the first guy she stalked. No, but he was the most persistent case. Even after she started dating you, she'd bring him up in conversation. Ask if anyone had heard anything about him. Why didn't anyone tell me? We hoped marriage would settle her down, help her focus on the future instead of the past. Well, it didn't work. No, it didn't. I'm sorry about that. You deserve better than this. After that conversation, I went inside and told Cassidy I'd be staying for a few days. Good call, he said. Let her sit with her choices for a while. The next morning, I got a call from my buddy Emery, who worked at the same company as me. Dude, what's going on? Riley called me asking weird questions about your wife. What kind of questions? Something about whether I knew she'd been contacting her ex, said she'd been messaging some guy for years. Word travels fast. So it's true. Unfortunately. Man, I'm sorry. That's messed up. Yeah, well, at least now I know where I stand. You need anything? Place to stay? Someone to talk to? I'm good for now. Thanks though. By noon, my phone was buzzing constantly. Her friends, my friends, family members who'd heard various versions of the story. The whole thing was turning into a circus. But the most interesting call came from someone I didn't expect. Zoe O'Connor, Robert's wife. Hi, she said when I answered. This is going to sound strange, but I think we need to talk. Your wife has been harassing my husband for years, Zoe said directly. I wanted you to know that we're considering a restraining order. I had no idea how bad it was until this week. Robert showed me everything. The messages, the attempts to contact his family, even the fake social media accounts she created when he blocked her. Fake accounts. There was more I didn't know about. I'm filing for divorce, I told her. This marriage is over. Good. Because if she contacts him again, we're taking legal action. That evening, I went home to get my things. She was waiting in the living room with packed suitcases by the door. I'm leaving, she announced. Going to stay with my sister. Running away won't fix this. There's nothing to fix. You've made it clear you don't want to work on our marriage. Work on what? Your obsession with a man who's considering a restraining order against you. Her face went white. What? His wife called me. Apparently, you've been creating fake accounts to message him. They're talking to a lawyer. She sat down heavily. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did. And now you get to live with the consequences. What about us? There is no us. There probably never was. You've been living in a fantasy for years. She picked up her suitcases. So that's it. 7 years of marriage and you're just giving up? You gave up 7 years ago when you decided I wasn't good enough. I never said that. You didn't have to. Every time you talked about Robert, every message you sent him, every time you compared our life to some imaginary alternative, you said it. She stood there for a moment, probably hoping I'd change my mind. When I didn't, she headed for the door. For what it's worth, she said, turning back, I am sorry. I believe you. But sorry doesn't fix anything. After she left, I sat in the quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. 3 months later, the divorce was final. She never tried to fight it. Last I heard, she'd moved to another state and was working at a dental office. Robert and Zoe never had to file that restraining order. Apparently, the threat was enough. As for me, I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. Turns out when you're not constantly walking on eggshells around someone who wishes they were somewhere else, life gets a lot more enjoyable. I kept the house, got a promotion at work, and started dating someone who actually wants to be with me. Novel concept. Sometimes people ask if I regret not trying harder to save the marriage. The answer is simple. You can't save something that was never actually there to begin with. She wanted Robert. Robert wanted nothing to do with her, and I refused to be anyone's consolation prize. The end.